Every day, people all over Malaysia are searching for a home, to buy, to rent, but it isn't easy. Some don't have the cash for a down payment. Others can't afford to make monthly loan payments. Most have no choice but to keep on renting. Thankfully, there's now an alternative. FundMyHome. It's a whole new way of owning a home. Here's how it works. Let's start with the buyer. Once he finds his dream home on FundMyHome, he pays 20% of the purchase price. Where does he get this? From his savings, or family and friends, or say a personal loan from a bank. This 20% payment is all the buyer needs to pay for the next 5 years, unlike a housing loan where a buyer would have to make the down payment and monthly repayments, which largely go towards servicing interest. Why rent when there's FundMyHome? Let's say he is currently renting a home. He doesn't need any upfront cash. His monthly rental is 1,200 ringgit. At the end of 5 years, he would have paid 72,000 ringgit on rental. But since he rented, his ownership of the property remains at zero. On the other hand, say he decides to use FundMyHome to purchase a property priced at 300,000 ringgit. He will need to pay 60,000 ringgit. He can pay this with his savings, borrow from friends and family, or take a 5-year personal loan of 60,000 ringgit, say at an interest rate of 7% per annum. His monthly repayment on this loan will be 1,200 ringgit, same as paying rental. At the end of 5 years, he would also have paid 72,000 ringgit. However, the big difference is, with this payment, he owns 20% of the home value under FundMyHome, unlike renting. FundMyHome helps you save towards owning a home and you get to move in right away. Who pays the balance 80% of the purchase price? Institutional investors then come in to pay the balance 80% of the purchase price. The buyer's home is now fully paid for. Why would institutions fund 80% of the home? Investors are paid returns for the 5-year period. This comes from a portion of the purchase price that developers set aside at the time of sale. Otherwise, it would not be possible to get investors to fund the 80% cost of the home. What happens after this? The buyer is the legal owner of the home, and he can occupy and enjoy the home during the 5 years. At the 5th anniversary, the buyer can choose to sell the home or stay on by repaying investors with a housing loan or savings, or roll over using FundMyHome, all based on the prevailing market value. What happens if the value of the home increases after 5 years? The purchase price of the home was 300,000 ringgit. At the end of 5 years, let's say the home is now worth 350,000 ringgit. 20% of the home value is now 70,000 ringgit. To maintain 20% ownership of the home value, he will have to top up just 10,000 ringgit since he has already paid 60,000 ringgit. On the other hand, if he had rented, he would have to raise 70,000 ringgit for 20% ownership of the home value. What happens if the value of the home decreases? In comparison to renting, the homeowner will never be worse off. Even if the home price falls by 10%, the buyer will still have 10% of the home value. If the price of the home falls by 20%, he is still not worse off compared to renting. The positive value created will help him to eventually own 100% of the home. What role do developers play in FundMyHome? FundMyHome aligns the interests of developers and homeowners. Developers receive 80% of the property price at the point of sale. The balance 20% is paid to them at the end of year 5, only if the property price appreciates by 20%. If the price of the property remains the same, the developer loses that 20%. Is FundMyHome for everyone? FundMyHome is open to every Malaysian who is a first-time home buyer. It is a new alternative to financing the purchase of a home. If you have access to a housing loan, prefer not to share your capital gains with others, and if you expect the home price to rise by 17% or more after 5 years, then a housing loan is better. However, the risk of losses due to a fall in the home price is also higher with a housing loan. With FundMyHome, your loss is limited to the capital you have invested, which is 20% of the purchase price of the home. It all depends on how you want to manage your funds and your tolerance for risk. Most importantly, FundMyHome provides you a first step onto the housing ladder.